Hey there, Job Seeker Nation. Welcome to our live stream. Every week we go to LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. If you want to know more about us and want to watch some of the shows that we've done in the past, you can go to our YouTube channel, hashtag Job Seeker Nation. Welcome to this very special edition that we're presenting. Today, we're going to focus mostly on the college student and their plight and how to proof their pandemic experience the next time around or any kind of economic downturn. We have with me, of course, Jack Kelly, my co host every single week, founder of Recruiter, compliance recruiter, and Forbes senior careers contributor. How are you, sir?
Good, good. Thanks. And hey, Andrew, great to have you aboard here. Thanks for coming on. And
Yes, we
Mark,
have
I don't know if
Andrea
Mark
Koppel.
warned you, having one college student, one who just graduated, I'm probably gonna have a lot of questions to pick
Hey,
your
I'm
brain.
I'm all about giving free advice, so
Okay.
Yes,
fire away.
yes, we love the fact that Andrea is a former journalist, and we'll get into more of that later. But she also hosts her own podcast, which some of them range like really short to really long. Should you do an interview, correct?
Yeah, well, actually, what I do, it's called Time for Coffee, as you see
Hmm.
there on the screen. Time, the number four, coffee.org. And that's shorthand for do you have time to grab a cup of coffee? So I can ask you about your career, your job, and how you built your career. And keeping in the coffee theme, what I try to do is I have a main interview that I do in which we get into what each guest does in their job and how they built their career. And because I understand that not everybody wants to spend 40 or 50 minutes listening to an entire interview, I also release clips that I
Hmm.
call K cups because I'm trying to keep in that coffee theme.
Hmm.
And they're anywhere
I like
between
that.
3 and 15 minutes long.
Oh, nice, nice, very nice. And also, you run the College to Career. I'm sorry, the College to Careers Academy, correct?
That's right. And this is to help overwhelmed, anxious, maybe even confused college students, usually juniors and seniors, who are looking towards graduation day and saying, "Oh my God, I don't know what I want to do." I
Hmm.
also help those who graduated recently who may also be overwhelmed and stuck, but I try to keep it to that somewhere in their 20s. I don't work with mid-career professionals
Hmm.
or with my peers who also reach out trying to get some help.
Good deal. We like what you do. I love what you post and your perspective and your stories. And of course, being a journalist, storytelling is the epicenter of what you do and how you do it. So let's go ahead and jump into the show with a question that is on a lot of folks' minds. And really, Um, I want to start with this question for you, Andrea, and then we'll jump in after you. What is the one piece of advice should parents stop giving their son or daughter student at this time?
Oh, I love that question, John. Thank you so much for asking it. And I want to preface what I'm about to say with this. I am a parent. I have a 17-year-old son who is a
Hmm.
junior in high school. And right now, he thinks he wants to be a theater major. I adore my son, and I'm doing this stuff full time, thinking about careers, thinking about how to maximize time in college. And
Hmm.
what I would say to myself is yes, you love your child dearly, but trust them. Trust them
Hmm.
to make their own decisions about what they want to do when they graduate, even if they're going to work at a convenience store, even if they're going to be a dog walker and you're pulling your hair out and you're thinking, I can't believe we just spent all this money for my son's name is Aiden, to go off and do something that he didn't even need a college degree to do. And the reason that I say that is that we discover our passion, we discover our purpose by doing, by experimenting, by failing, and by trying. In fact, I liken it to being a mad scientist in a laboratory. And you're wearing those big plastic goggles, and you got your plastic gloves on, and you've got your Bunsen burner and your beaker, and you're holding your test tubes. And what does a mad scientist do? He experiments. He tests, he iterates, he puts all different ingredients into those test tubes, and sometimes it blows up in his face or in her face. And the experiment didn't work. But that's the whole nature of being a scientist, is that you continue to test, to iterate, to experiment. So let your kids experiment. That is actually how they will uncover what is their calling, what is their purpose and their passion. We've been talking so much of conventional wisdom, Jack and John, is, forgive
Mark.
me, Mark,
Mark.
I'm so sorry, Mark
That's right.
and John, is
I've been
ass
called worse than
backwards,
Mark for this
is
show.
ass backwards. We're telling these young people to follow their passion. Most of them haven't discovered their professional passion yet. They will uncover that by trying out, by testing, by iterating, and learning what they don't like as much as they will learn what they do like.
Good deal.
See, I'm aboard with
Jack?
everything you're saying. The only thing that gives me concern is this. It's such a competitive world out there, and such a competitive market for people getting out of school, is that you lose valuable time. And I hate to talk this way, because it would be a better world if your son could go major in theater, enjoy it, maybe try his hand on Broadway or acting, whatever he wants to do. But for a lot of kids, if you do that and it doesn't work, and now you're 26 years old, 27-year-old, it's hard to get back into the swing of things, and you're really behind. Could you catch up? Yeah, but it's tough. And I don't have an easy answer for it, because it's not a very forgiving kind of economy for what I'm finding out for young people starting out. And I think in large part too, because this is like the second year of a pandemic. So you have one whole cohort of kids graduating in the worst environment. And then now, as people are graduating, it's better. And I'd be curious what you feel about this. Like I've done a deep dive into it, and we wrote a piece in Forbes about it. When you look and search for entry-level jobs, they call for 2 or 3 years experience, which I think for all the three of us, when we started out, an entry-level job is an entry-level job. No experience, you just step into it. Now,
So,
the bar's higher.
Well, yes and no. And the reason that I say that, Jack, is that I'm sure you're familiar with the annual surveys that PwC does of CEOs. And in the one that came out in 2019, they surveyed 1,300 CEOs in 75 countries. And one of the questions was basically, what's keeping you up at night? And the second biggest concern was that their people be adaptable. And this was a year before the pandemic. So I think the fact that our young people need to be able to reskill, upskill, college is not the end of their education. And I would also say that if my son were to go to Broadway and were to get that stage experience or just going through the rejection over and over and over again. Those are valuable skills to have. Resilience is an incredibly important soft skill to have. And one story I can share with you about a woman who was a musical theater major about 15 years ago, so just before the last recession. She ended up going to Broadway, was very successful, and all of a sudden realized she was a stress puppy. She was going gray at age 26. She had insomnia, and she turned to a woman who was part of one of the theaters that she was performing in, and she said, "Why are you so calm and so zen?" And she said, "Meditation." Emily had never heard of meditation before, certainly hadn't explored it in any kind of a serious way. She ended up going to India, studying there for 3 years, learned all about the Vedas, came back. I'm going to fast forward now. She was one of the first people
Can I just interject
to
one
go
thing, though?
online.
Andrea, can I interject one thing?
If my story is almost over, she was one of the first people to teach meditation online, and she's now a multi-7-figure entrepreneur. She didn't study any of that. She didn't study business as an undergrad. All of these, and she's the most phenomenal teacher now because of her acting experience.
I hear that, but for the most Americans don't have the luxury of traveling to India for years. They don't have wealthy families. They don't have the wealth themselves, and that's not an option. So that could be good for some people, but for the vast majority of people, they can't afford. Literally, they can't afford to take 2-3 years out of their lives when they're paying $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year in college tuition, and you have $200,000, $300,000 in debt. You have to get a job right away, and that's the scary reality for people. Now, if your family has, wait, let me finish. If a family has the means to do it, that's great. If you don't, you're in a bad situation, because now you lost that time. You can't pay back your mortgages. You can't move out of your house. You can't afford a house. You're not going to have kids. I can't tell you how many people I know in my family alone who are young people who just are already decided, I'm not going to have kids. Not because they don't want to have kids, but with the college debt and the burden and the jobs they're getting, they feel they can't afford it. And that's a big issue for our country. That's a big problem. And with the CEO survey, I mean, these CEOs say these things, right? They say these things, but who do they hire? They want to hire the software engineer. They'll talk the talk, but if you go to any website right now, I'll tell you, turn on any website and you'll see the vast majority of jobs, you'll find either kind of these software engineers and software developers, or on the other side, you're going to have a lot of jobs for waiters, waitresses, cooks, and that kind of stuff. Regular kind of right in the middle. That's where the hard time is. And the media doesn't talk about that. But those are the people who are having a tough time getting their first jobs, getting their second jobs, getting their foot on the rungs of the ladder and growing.
Go ahead, Andrea.
Okay, thank you. So I hear what you're saying, Jack, and I will just point out where you're coming from. Like, the emotion that you're projecting right now is one of fear. And
no, it's not fair. It's reality. It's reality. It's reality. It's reality. It's reality. It's reality and concern. It's reality and concern. Don't say it's fair. Don't. You don't know what I'm thinking.
I have dedicated the last almost 4 years of my life, most of which has been unpaid, in service of trying to help the thousands upon thousands of young people who are graduating, who don't know what they want to do, who have thousands, tens of thousands in some cases, worth of debt that they need to pay back. So I hear you, but the emotion that you are projecting right now is one of fear.
No,
and what I am
fear.
saying,
it's not. Don't put words in my mouth. It's not fear. I think what I'm giving is reality. I'm giving what I'm giving is reality.
Andrea,
what I'm giving is reality, and because I don't want to steer people and say, hey, if you could do, I don't feel comfortable. to not push back on it. If someone is watching this and feels, okay, do this, and then your kid is going to be 3 years down the road in a lot of debt that they can't pay back, and their life is going to be really tough. And that's the harsh reality that we have to
I
deal with.
don't
It's not
think you
fair.
heard me
It's just what it
say.
is. I heard what you said. I heard everything. I was listening
I
very
I
clearly.
actually haven't finished. I was just beginning to respond to your
Well, I
statement.
was going to say,
And what I would
go
like to
ahead,
say, if you
go ahead.
want me to talk, if you want me here as your guest, I can actually, if you prefer just to have a conversation between yourselves,
We're not having
I'm
a
happy
conversation. I'm
I'm
saying
happy
yes, or
to
you don't like what
leave,
I'm saying, but
but
that's a
no,
conversation.
I am
I mean,
I
you
am
don't like what I'm
saying
saying.
to
That's
you,
obvious, but
Jack,
that's what a
what I
conversation
am
is.
saying to you is that I disagree with putting fear into the hearts of our young people that somehow or another, if they don't start thinking about what they want to do, the second that they graduate from college and get that job in finance or get that job in tech, that their lives are going to be ruined because they won't be able to buy a house, because they won't be able to have children. I think that is misguided. And I have done a huge amount of research on my own, which backs this up. And for every one person or 10 people you give me who have had their lives, go off course, I can match that. So
Well,
2008,
mhm.
2008 was our last great recession. And a young man, and by the way, Emily Fletcher, who I was talking about earlier, does not come from money, did not have wealth to back her up when she went to study in India. But the young man who I'm about to talk about is another example of somebody who didn't come from money, went to Franklin and Marshall College in Pennsylvania, graduated in 2008. It is not a school where Wall Street firms come to recruit. He instead sent out hundreds upon hundreds of emails, cold emailing all the different Wall Street firms, and he ended up getting one response, which he ended up using to get a backdoor in as like not even an entry level position, sub entry level, and through his own hard work and grit ended up moving up the ladder, ended up going off trying to launch his own tech startup. And today, because he started a podcast and started getting involved in the podcasting world, interviewing CEOs and other founders, he is actually the American Public Media Group head of podcasting. You cannot predict where your life is going to take you. I firmly believe in taking that first step, following your interests where they lead you, and letting the magic of life unfold. And I would love to learn more about both of your backgrounds, because I'm guessing that there were either people or experiences that you had that ended up pulling you in a direction that you had not anticipated when you were in college.
Well, Andrea, let's go ahead and do this. There's a show for that. And and everything, we've taken everything in. One of the things that we could do here is maybe shift it more towards the people who are watching, because I know that we have some dynamics going on here. Let's shift it towards the needs of the people at large, especially those who are listening that may have college students in school, or that they're in college no matter what age they are, because they're different ages, as far as the advice that we're giving. And I'm sure that, Jack, your advice, we've talked about this before, that the advice changes from week to week at times of how we give it, and it depends on the person always. But for today's college graduates, and I think some of this has been differentiated here between the both of you, and even I have a perspective which I haven't logged in yet on. But how has the pandemic for you, at this particular point, has job search and career advice changed as far as what you should give college students at this particular time?
For
Jack,
me, would you like,
Jack,
or Jack?
Jack.
Oh, no, you could go ahead.
Okay,
I, I, I
I'll
yeah.
start first on this particular one. I think because there's an ever changing landscape as far as the way college students. I'm wondering how closely college students are actually watching, because as a college student, some do pay attention to current events, and probably out of all the generations of schools, this is the one that's the most conscientious for a variety of different reasons, because a lot of it has leaped into the college environment and culture, as far as way, especially way it affects their parents. And some of them come more now than ever come from single parent homes. So the advice just seems to differentiate between each other. And I'd say a lot of times that if a college student should be able, and probably both of you are familiar with information interviews, because we talk a lot about it. That's probably one of the best ways that people
Mm,
can actually stay in tune to their career, is they're always in the mode of asking questions and then coming back and reconfiguring. It's sort of like the GPS, where it used to, you start to go in the wrong direction, it'll say reconfigure. That's what the college student today is going to be stacked up against, is that they're going to always, and I think that's always been the case, but I think the to remain stagnant on one piece of advice that maybe my parents give doesn't work anymore. I know that there's three pieces I could think right up your hands, and you guys too, that definitely does not work these days. That's been proven, because that advice was given from, from that time period, whenever that was. But all in all, is that as somebody who gives advice, I have to listen pretty closely to what they're telling me, and also what their goals are and what they're looking for. Because I think too, Jack, you and I have talked about, this is probably the most conscious group that cares about their values more than any other time. Jack, your thought?
absolutely. Yeah. And just to clarify, so where I'm coming from is this base. And just to give you a personal anecdote, when I graduated from school, kind of didn't find my way for a while, pursued my passions and things I'm interested. But as time goes on, you find your niche, find your comfort zone, find the intersection, kind of the Venn diagram of what you're good at, what you like to do, and and you can do well at it. Turned out fine. I'm worth millions of dollars, pretty successful, but that doesn't work for everybody. Now, I do believe that people should, when they start out, do things that they enjoy doing, that they feel comfortable doing, they want to do, they can see a future in it, and there's jobs out there for it, there's opportunity and the means to make a living. So I'm with you on that. I think we'd agree, Andrea, that we're on the same page. The only thing that, and it's not creates of fear that it's coming from or emotion, it's a question of reality. And unfortunately, the reality is tough. And in my opinion, by not sharing that with my kids or other young people, I feel I would do them a disservice. Now, does that mean they should run scared? Does that mean they should run to a status job for the sake of a status job, or a high paying job just for the sake of it? No. But it's something that you want to inject, and I'm sure you do this with your kids, just reality. So they know, so they understand, hey, by making a decision, here are the consequences, here are how things play out. And then you can make an informed decision. And you can say, hey, I'm willing to take that risk. I'm willing to pursue the arts, knowing that maybe I won't hit, but then maybe I'll learn something and I could do something else. So that you can manage expectations, how it happens. So that's why, maybe I came across a little passion about it, because I am worried for a lot of the young people in this world, because I just see firsthand how challenging it is and how hard it is to buy a car, have your cell phone, have an apartment, because it's so darn expensive, and they have such high tuition repayments that this younger generation has it so worse off than prior generations. This is like one of the first generations that the odds are they're not going to do as well or better than their parents.
Mhm.
And that's a sad state of affairs. And it does break my heart that that happens. And unfortunately for this younger group, they don't have a lot of the luxury of older generations when they can go into the workforce, and it was much easier to kind of go and grow. Um, and it's tough. It's not an easy answer, because we could both have on one side hey, you took a circuitous route and you learned a lot, and then ultimately you succeeded. But succeed doesn't necessarily be defined as wealth or what have you. It's what your version of success is. And then you could have others who went right, and we've all seen this. You have people who did all the quote unquote right things and are miserable and unhappy. They chose a job, their parents kind of pushed them to be a lawyer or what have you, and they find out that 35, 45 years and they hate what they do and they're miserable, but they're stuck. And, and we've all run into it, and you can tell they're just unhappy and miserable people. So it's, you know what I mean? So I'm coming from that space, Angie. I'm not coming from a space of, no, your advice is crazy. It's more of, I feel for these kids so much because I see them and I hear them. And when I say, think about this, I'm not saying having kids is for everybody, having a house is for everybody. But when you hear young people just throw up their hands and say, like, I'm never going to have kids, or I'm never going to have a house, not because they don't want to, because they feel they just can't afford it. They can't both, you know what I mean? And that's really rough to hear.
So I feel
Andrea?
like it's an echo chamber, because everything you've said, they know. They know all of that.
You think
That's
so?
why, that's why they're
Yeah.
overwhelmed.
That's true.
why they're
That's true.
stuck.
That's true. That's
Because
true.
they're so afraid they're going to make a mistake.
Yeah,
And
that's
they
true.
are
There's some very stressed.
immobilized by
Yeah.
that. And so one of the first things that I do with the students that I work with, Jack, is to try to get them centered and to try to get them to turn out the noise from social media, the noise from their peers, and the loving concern expressed by their parents and those in their family. And I try to get them, to your point, to tune into who they are, what their skills are, what their superpowers are. And I don't throw that term around lightly. The fact is, there are any number of incredible assets that they have disregarded, whether it's their facility for music, for communication, for the arts, for interpersonal dialogue. All of these things are assets. And then to identify what their interests are, those things that they do, some of them in the classroom, but oftentimes outside the classroom, in their hobbies, their extracurriculars, their part-time or full-time jobs, their volunteer work. And then we look at identifying where their skills align with different job functions. And the fact is, those job functions are cross-cutting into a million different industries that align with their interests. So you want to be practical, of course, but you also don't need to make this a do or die. You're going to ruin your life if you make the wrong move. In fact, I might even posit that the mistakes that they make are going to be helpful to them and help them pivot into a direction that would be more fruitful, more advantageous to them down the line. And again, so many examples of this that I'm happy to share, of people who've had just that experience. And these are one-offs. I'm sure you're familiar with the book Range, that was a 2020 bestseller. I mean, there's so much research out there that shows that people who cast a wider net and have more varied experiences tend to be more valuable and have more successful careers over the longer run.
Well, I think that when we talk about, you're directly involved, Andrea, as both a parent and a coach, as opposed to Jack and I. We're parents. I have older kids, and I have one that went to the Air Force first, then got his MBA, then he's doing his master's in nursing. He's very, very clear, but he's very rare as opposed to what he really wants to do. My youngest son didn't finish school, and you know what? I was very happy. You know why? Because that was not academia was never his thing. But we believed as parents that at least let them get a year worth of college. He got 2 years under his belt, but it was found out that's not going to be his path right away. Somewhere along the line, that's going to be him. But he was able to fall into a career in banking. Is funny enough that all this is. So who would have thought that he would be in banking right now? He's in a lower level, but he's looking upward. So he's working towards that. But I think there's everybody's kids is different, and we got to kind of look at the way that the advice is given. It's good to know as much information about who the audience is to give the right advice, because I know a lot of us, we just says go ahead, work hard and you'll make it. That's not necessarily true, because in this particular environment you could work hard and still get fired. In fact, some would say that if you didn't, you got fired because you didn't work hard enough. So we or the opposite is that because you worked too hard, you got fired. We can argue all a lot of these points, but I think one of the things that to bring it back is that pandemic has changed, the way that we even look at careers and job search now, because just 2 years ago we were telling people that how they should appear physically in an interview. Now you might be physically in the interview, you might not. And very often, the first two or three interviews that you have may be with a video. It may be taking a test that's a behavioral test
Mhm.
that's basically by artificial intelligence, and that you might have to answer some kind of questionnaire that's online before you even see someone. So I think that landscape is kind of changed, and that's the kind of thing that we need to look for as somebody that gives a lot of advice to people, especially those who are in college. For Jack and I, probably we see more mid career, upper career than you do, because you don't deal with that at all. But I think there's a common theme there, is that, yeah, you even mentioned it. You have to be adaptable, and being adaptable is very important no matter how you run in this particular economy. Jack?
I don't know. Is there a question there? I'm not sure.
Well, I just made a
But
comment to
yeah,
kind of comment about the question that we
yeah,
had
yeah, yeah,
that we had on the floor. If
yeah.
you want to add, or you want to embellish
Yeah,
something else.
I mean, just to kind of, yeah, go not to kind of retrace stuff, but give you an example. My daughter, so
Mhm,
she is a film major, which is a risky area to go into, but I'm all for it. I'm 100% behind her and support
mhm.
her. In fact, she hates that I keep trying to write like little screenplays for her because she thinks they all suck, and I think they're pretty good, by the way. But I'm always like, seriously, true story. I'm always like, oh, I got a great idea, I'm writing, we're getting a whole screen. Like, hey, what do you think of that? Because you could do it in 5-10 minutes. You could do it in your apartment. It's not going to cost a lot. You could do have just a camera, make it easy. Yeah, it
And put
does
it
work.
on YouTube.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I'm all I've actually I've acted in when she has films. I'm, whatever. Hey, I need someone to just be dead on the floor with
Yeah.
ketchup as blood. I'm like, all right, I'm there. So yeah, I'm all aboard. And I get it's risky. It could work, it could not work. But I have faith in her. Whatever she's going to do, she'll make her way. And I get, so I don't disagree with you. It's just, uh, yeah, so my own kids, my son's so interesting. He's on the other side. He's more finance and data analytics and has completely different mindset. And I have all the faith, and I leave it up to him. Whatever you want to do, go for it. You want to be a data analyst, great. You want to do something else, fine. Whatever works, because that's going to make him happy. And sometimes, what I find out with whether kids or adults, if you feel pushed into something, you're never going to really like it because you feel what's your decision. But if you do something and because you like it, even if you fail, it's all right because you did it yourself. You didn't do it because someone pushed you into it. And sometimes also, if you do it on your own, you have something to prove. Look, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to do it. And you take greater pleasure when you do
Mhm.
succeed in it.
Yeah. Andrea?
I was just going to reference one of my favorite books. I don't know if either one of you is familiar with Heather McGowan and Chris Shipley, The Adaptation Advantage. And in this book, I mean, it is a wealth of information, but I love they have a little section in which they're talking about salaries and expected salaries. And just take a shot in the dark here and give me the major that you think would be the highest, where you could expect the highest salary as an entry level employee.
Right now, in this environment, I would say kind of a couple of different things. It could be nursing, it could be management consulting, it could be software engineers, finance, working at a tech startup. Those are some of the things that I would say would be pretty attractive.
So the one that they cite is linguistics. And one of the lower majors is studying, like, being pre-law. I find that fascinating, and I can give you an example of a young woman who I interviewed who was a linguistics major, and she's actually now working in impact investing. It was her Spanish and her Chinese, I believe it was more the Spanish, that brought her to Latin America. She ended up moving into development, not international development, but into the development role, bringing in new clients. And that's how she built her career. So I just say that because we have certain things, and I don't think I'm not saying that those majors that you mentioned, Jack, wouldn't also be lucrative. But when it comes to tech, after 10 years, you kind of hit the max of your earning potential.
Yeah, but come on. You can't say that someone is going to go tech and they're not going to have a better career on average, on whole, than someone who does linguistics. You're not going to sell me on that.
Well, it depends if you're defining better by how much money somebody makes.
Well, she's saying you're going to, at tech, you're just going to plateau out. I find that hard to believe, but linguistics going to keep going. It's not real life.
You tap out after 10 years because your knowledge base has been overtaken.
You upskill and you learn. You upskill and keep moving forward. That's what everyone has to do.
George Anders, I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a former Wall Street Journal Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who is now one of the editors at large at LinkedIn. He wrote a book called You Can Do Anything. And in it, the book starts in 2008 after the last Great Recession. And he ends up, the whole book is about how conventional wisdom is that if you're skilled in tech, you're going to be the go-to hires. And what he showed is, and this is no huge revelation, right? There's a whole ecosystem around the guys who are the engineers and the techies. You need the marketing people, you need the biz dev people, you need the sales people, you need the communicators. So I just think we want to give our listeners and our viewers a big picture of all of the ways that you can use different majors. I think one of the
sales is a great way to do really well in a career and do well financially. That's one of the areas that parents don't generally tell their kids, hey, go into sales, because it doesn't have the kind of social standing as others. Same way they wouldn't say go into the trades and be a plumber or carpenter, where they make a lot of money and they do well. They could end up being entrepreneurs.
We think the worst and the best.
And running their businesses. A good salesperson is going to probably earn much more than the vast majority of the other people in the organization. So I subscribe to the fact that if you're good at schmoozing and you can relate to people and you're kind of charismatic and you want to go into a sales related position, you could do phenomenally well for yourself. You see a lot of executives grew up in that area. Same thing. Hey, you want to go into the trades, you're good with your hands. You could be an amazing electrician. Before you know it, you have a whole team. You're a plumber. Then you have 20 trucks all over the place, taking care of clients. So there are lots of different ways to go and lots of different ways to succeed. But I think really the thing is we have to look at the real world and the real life and most people on average on what they do and where they're going, and to give advice that really gives a better chance to go somewhere. It doesn't mean you go right out of the gate, you're going to be successful. It doesn't mean the first 5 years to be successful. But we got to really look at how things operate. No disrespect, but linguistic, I don't know. I don't know one person my whole life who became very successful by being, majoring in linguistics.
So let me raise my hand here, Jack, because I majored in political science, Asian studies, and Mandarin Chinese. And my first job after I had a curveball thrown to me, I was going to go into the Peace Corps. I ended up getting hired working for a trade and finance firm that only hired young women who spoke Mandarin Chinese. I ended up going to Beijing, working there for 6 months. I knew I wasn't going to like the job. I wasn't interested in business. It was while I was there
that
I
fun,
was
though. That's
exposed
awesome.
to. It was fascinating, but I didn't love it, And all of my friends were journalists. I realized that that's where my passion lay. P.S. I was the news director of my college radio station while I was in school. That was one of my extracurriculars, but I didn't realize that those were breadcrumbs I should follow. So I quit that job. I moved back to the US. I ended up becoming a journalist, did that for 20 years, 14 of them with CNN, was a foreign correspondent in Japan and in China, was hired because I spoke Chinese, obviously also because I am a good communicator, and ended up being the Beijing bureau chief for CNN, came back, covered American foreign policy, ended up covering Capitol Hill, then moved into public relations, then moved into the nonprofit world. What you see here, and what I was going to say before, is that where higher ed, I think, does a misservice for our young people is that you are in school with blinders on, self-identifying by your major. And instead, think of it as the foundation of a professional skyscraper that you're going to be building over the course of your professional life, with each new job and each new career adding a new floor in your skyscraper. So think about the hard skills and the soft skills that you are learning inside and outside the classroom, whether it be foreign languages, whether it be finance, whether it be marketing, whether it be physics, and use that as the jumping off point. These are transferable skills to get into an industry that interests you. Don't worry about having it all mapped out, because magic happens. You will meet people. Some people might call it serendipity. You will be exposed into different jobs, different functions that you didn't know exist. Maybe they didn't exist before. And you will evolve through the course of your professional life.
Well, let's go ahead and thank you for that, Andrea. I appreciate that. I want to get to a question the viewer has. Christine asks, do you have advice on how people can not seek members, but seek mentors in a virtual environment? And I think that's a very interesting question, because I think that being that we're not physically there, and that the interactions and the dynamics that could happen virtually could misconstrue messages. But this person wants to find out how you can connect with mentors. Andrea, I'm going to toss it to you first. And let's try to keep it brief to about a minute answer at this particular point, because we want to get to the rest of the questions we have.
Of course. I would say LinkedIn. LinkedIn is where it is at. We heard John mention earlier informational interviews. That is a wonderful way for
Right.
you to start the conversation. Reach out, connect with somebody, send a message of 300 characters, try to find a point of connection with them, something you have in common. I recommend using your alumni network to start off. Or if you're already out in the workforce and have a few years under your belt, maybe the companies where you used to work or currently work, and just reach out to them and say, I'd love to connect. And then ask them if they would have a virtual coffee with you, and start by asking questions about what they do. And if you feel a vibe with that person, ask them if they would mind if you followed up with them in a month and had some additional questions to ask, and just let it unfold organically.
Jack?
I just want to go back. So one thing you mentioned really resonated about learning Mandarin and going to China. Sometimes, and this is just sometimes being in the right place at the right time, and luck plays a big part in people's careers. So if you knew Mandarin 25, 30 years ago, whatever it is, before the ascendancy of China, wow, you could have, if you decided to stay in that direction, or other folks who did that, boy, what a career track you would have, because you participated in the whole growth trajectory of China. So it is, and I agree with you, it is that you don't have to be blocked in by a major, because you could have some interests that, if they're aligned with the trends that are happening currently and moving forward, that could be the best thing possible. Where people think, why are you doing Mandarin? And I don't get it. And meanwhile, if let's say you really loved it and loved business, then you could have been a CEO of, a US, company in China. So it does, and that's to your point. So you're able, based on your interests, your likes, your talents, what you're good at, what your superpowers are, you could kind of go with that. But then with a little luck, and you're in the right place at the right time, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think I think the main course of that I got from Andrea, and maybe this is something she did or she didn't. This is what I heard. Maybe it wasn't said that that person went as a in linguistics
Mhm.
because there was a demand in that field, and that person was maybe in some of our recruiter friends would call a purple squirrel, so to speak,
Yeah.
one of those very rare people who got into a field that there was a great demand for and had the right skill set, and they jumped on him and probably was willing to pay him to keep him happy, because of how long it may even take to find somebody who had that combination ever again. It's the same difference, the same thing we're kind of going now with our economy. Prices are going up because there's more demand than there is supply, and you start to pay more for the supply just so that you can get more of it right away to
Right.
give to your customers.
So
So it's
now,
the
Mark,
same thing.
it's funny. I wonder, I don't know enough about this, but I wonder, for kids who maybe studied supply chain and logistics, all of a sudden, like, I'm in demand.
The
like,
golden
like,
era.
right, where parents would be like, what are you doing logistics? What kind of job do you have? And now they say,
Right,
nah,
right.
see, mom, dad, yeah, I knew what I was doing. Look, now you're all asking me
But
questions. Why are the shelves empty? I know why. I know what's
But to
happening.
Andrea's point
Yeah.
is that if that person wasn't a free thinker and that he was head straight
Yeah.
ahead, do you think they would have gotten there? And I think that
Yeah.
I think there needs to be some room for free thinking. And a lot of times, me, I wrote an article about this earlier this year, Jack. I wrote an article that parents shouldn't be giving their kids advice now. I mean, and no kids. They leave them alone. Let them go. That's the only reason why I said, not that we couldn't give good advice, but one is that we have so much writing on them and writing on people like that we tend to give. So, well, we start to default to what we know is that the way we grew up. Now, as much knowledge that you and I have about job search and careers, as much as we've been talking about this for more than 50 something shows now, you know, and we've had all kinds of guests to give us information to learn from and for us to give that information. You know, there's so much out there now that we can't. It's a different time.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
goes back to my first question. How much has our advice changed? And sometimes we need to give that advice that doesn't embody any part of us.
But let me
And
say,
I think
Andrea, because this dovetails what Mark is saying. Do you get this in your meetings with people where you'll say something and the kids will be, oh, yeah, that's great. That's wonderful. And the parents roll their eyes like, I say that all the time. They don't listen to me
this is right.
because
Oh,
they'll listen to
completely.
right? They'll
Yes,
listen to you. They'll
we
listen
all
to
been
Mark,
there.
me, but they won't listen to their parents. It's hilarious. It'll be the same advice, but if they hear it from
Yep.
someone else,
So it just takes somebody
they're like,
else to
that's
come
It's
along.
genius. That's
this
awesome.
is biological. They are wired to
Right.
reject whatever we tell them. This is part of the natural sort
Right.
of
So funny.
developmental process
Yeah.
of becoming a young adult.
Yeah, when I
It's
was
so
doing coaching, I
right.
got hired by a couple of people who were career counselors and career coaches to do their kids because they said there's just no way I can be objective about giving the
Yes.
advice. I had and I've seen it for myself, and they're right. And I'm going like, did you give him her that
Oh my
advice?
God, I did the same thing, Mark. So like, yeah. So like, if let's say baseball need extra help, instead of me coaching to hit and pitch, I'm like, you know what? Mark is great at that. He'll teach you, and it's so much easier, so much better, so much cleaner. And then I would take Mark's kid and say, "Oh, come here, come on,
Right,
I'll help you out here."
exactly,
And we both
exactly.
say the same things, but it's just different
But
parents, and it's
you're
hilarious
just
how that
reaffirming.
happens. It's
But
yeah,
it's not also not uncommon for them to go and say and see their
yeah,
friends doing something really cool and say, I want to do that.
yeah,
And it's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh gosh, here we go. So it
Yeah.
happens in all different forms, and we should be ready to embrace all of it. But caution taken, yeah, time is not on their side, but somewhat time is on their side because we're living longer now. And I don't know when the world is going to catch up to it, but we say 65 is a retirement. I'm 60. I am just
Yeah.
beginning this journey for
I
me.
You
I
feel
get
don't
that
it.
know
way?
about you.
Yeah.
I am just beginning. The retirement, as my parents knew it, was to play bridge and travel around the country for 10 years, and that's what they did. They traveled around the country and played bridge, and they loved it. They were in everywhere. It was like they were rock stars. They said, "Where are you now? We're calling Kansas City, but we're going to make this stop here, there, and everywhere." Oh, we're gonna take a vacation. You're on vacation the whole time. So it's like, yeah, it's just a totally different area. But boy, did we have a robust discussion today. This is going down the archives as one of my favorites for a lot of different reasons. But I think though that we everybody's got a side dish of something, and really there's not one right or wrong answer. But I think that's part of the point is we provide a potpourri of advice here. But Andrea, tell the people what you've got coming next that they should know about. Any podcast that you got coming up? Maybe you're speaking somewhere, or you've got an article coming out.
Well,
Let
I
us know.
post every single day on LinkedIn and
Mhm.
try to share some of the best career advice and job seeking tips that I can. My podcast, Time for Coffee, has episodes coming out almost every day. I have all
Wow.
kinds, I have a library of almost 900 episodes that you can
Woo.
find at time, the number 4coffee.org.
Mhm.
And I would welcome folks following me, interacting with me on LinkedIn, or going to the Time for Coffee website where they can search the episodes that I've put out,
Mhm.
or if they want to book a free career discovery session with me, they can. I'm going to have a college to career clarity boot camp coming up early in the new year. This is for those who are juniors and seniors who don't know what they want to do. Day one, we get clarity. Day two, we get into the job seeking tools, tactics, and strategies to help them find those jobs.
Great. Jack, what you got come up? Anything on the
Well, I
fourth
do, but
hour?
can I substitute my time for a quick question for Andrea?
Sure.
I'm really curious.
Go for
How
it.
do you don't mind this is career oriented. What do you think of journalism now compared to when you were there? Because it seems like from what I was like, say, when a kid till now, it just seems so different, when you watch the news and how they report.
Oh,
What do you think from the
I mean,
inside?
look, I just had a post. I had 2 posts this week on LinkedIn about having followed now deceased Secretary of State Colin Powell around the world for 4 years, and shared some of my memories of traveling with him
Wow,
and
that's awesome.
the kind of person
Mhm.
that he was behind the scenes and whatnot. And I had a uh, television station in Nigeria reach out to me to do a live hit. It would have been 3:15 in the morning my time. I respectfully declined. I had the Black News Network, which didn't exist not that long ago, reach out to me for an interview. I had a couple of other networks, I can't even remember the names of them, that they didn't exist 2 years ago, reach out to me for a live stream interview. So I actually think it's incredibly exciting. I'm of course disheartened by the fact that there is so much vitriol and there's so much partisanship.
Because it wasn't that way,
And
right?
it
I'm not
wasn't
right.
that
I don't.
way, and the fact that the
Yeah,
media used to be viewed as an unbiased arbiter
yeah.
of the facts, putting the facts out there, letting the audience decide, not pandering to one side or the other. But for our young viewers out there who may be interested in journalism, I think it's an incredibly dynamic time to want to explore this industry, not in the sort of more traditional bricks and mortar, the ABCs, NBCs, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, those, the established, but more of the up and coming
Right?
news
There's so many
agencies.
outlets now. There's
Yeah,
so
they
many
are.
different ways. You can even publish on Substack. I mean, there's so many ways to get your voice out there
And
now
these
that you didn't
places have
have.
Absolutely.
millions of viewers
Yeah.
even. I was on, NTD Network, not that long ago. Their YouTube page has more than a couple of million views,
Yeah.
subscribers. It's crazy. So you
Yeah.
may never heard of some of those, but now they can have millions of followers. So it's very splintered now. Not so much, and they have, and some of them will do things for political gain, and others are really trying to follow traditional neutral news viewpoints.
Yeah.
So yeah, very interesting time. So Jack, you have anything coming up that the people should know about?
Let's see. I've been writing a lot because there's so much going on. It's amazing.
Yeah,
And
it
really
is.
I've been speaking to a lot of CEOs and execs trying to get a sense of hybrid work, remote work, and one thing that's really interesting, and I think Andrew touches on this too, is that for the first time I've seen senior level execs are really paying attention to the mental health and well-being of their workers. And a lot of the things they're putting in place are very employee centric, which is amazing because in the past, not so much. You didn't talk about mental health issues. You didn't talk about burnout. You didn't talk about isolation. And now, I guess, because the great resignation and the war for talent, like all these CEOs I'm interviewing, boy, they're putting a big push to ensure that their people are taken care of and their mental health and well-being is looked after. And it's really good to see. I hope it lasts. I hope this is not like this phase we're in. Like remember 9/11 afterwards, we had this really phase like everybody pulled together as Americans and we really bonded but then somehow it just disintegrated. I hope maybe that type of, really taking care of the workers keeps, moving forward. So that's what I've been writing a lot about,
Good
and I have
deal.
a lot of
Yeah.
stuff lined up.
Great.
Yeah, I've been trying to
Yeah.
keep up with what you put out so much. It takes
I'm out of
me
my mind.
it
I'm
takes
too
me
full.
about a week to catch
Dude,
up.
it's,
But,
it is. There's just so much. I'm like, oh gosh, I got to write about this.
yeah.
This is like, I can't even keep, because there's like
Yeah,
so many things happening,
I know.
so it's well,
I'm trying to find time
yeah.
to but I just posted something on the voiceofjobseekers.com. Many can go there, and I can't wait to share about some of
Cool.
the upcoming stuff that's happening. I mean, lots of great stuff I'm going to be putting out. So, well, I hope it's great. At least in my eyes. But besides that, those of you who are watching, you've been watching Job Seeker Nation, streaming always to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. We thank you very much. Andrea, thank you so
Thank you
much
very
for
much. It was a
joining
pleasure
us.
meeting you. Thank
It
you.
was
Thank
great
you.
Thanks.
meeting you.
Thank you
And for
both.
the rest of you,
All
join
right.
us next week. Let me give a rundown of who's going to be on the show. Next week will be Seta Regmi. We're going to talk a lot about remote work. And following will be Matt Warzel, Lisa Plain, Chelsea J. Robin Ryan and Hannah Morgan's going to join us on December
Awesome.
1st for a 2022 job search trends show.
Can't believe we're
We're
talking about
going,
that. I
yeah, I
can't.
know, right? But it's that close. So thank you guys very much. We'll
Okay.
be back here
Thanks.
1 p.m. Wednesday, always, except for Thanksgiving week. We're
Yeah.
going to take Thanksgiving week off.
Yes.
In the meantime, thank you, Andrea,
Thanks.
Jack.
Thank you so
Thanks a
much. Nice
Thank
bunch.
meeting you.
you.
And
All right.
you all have a great week.
Take care.
Peace in the Valley of Love.
Bye.